Folks, we're delighted again to have Doug with us. Doug Vrieland. Doug is an accomplished author, an accomplished pastor, and chaplain. After serving 3 churches as pastor, he became a chaplain in the U.S. Navy, from which he retired as a lieutenant commander after several deployments, including one in Iraq. Doug's the author of The Fort, which is a detailed account of growing up in a Detroit suburb during the civil rights movement of the 60s. He has a BA from that other school in Grand Rapids, and an MDiv from Calvin Theological Seminary, and a DM from Fuller Theological Seminary. We're just so delighted to have you here, Doug. Now, per the drill, as I've done this in the past, I have a list of 28 questions that we'd like to ask, and we need someone to call out a number, and we will ask him that particular question. So give me a number. 10? Okay, 10 it is. All right. Oh, this is a good one. Okay. Doug, we wanted to know, what was your favorite date? Your favorite date. Let's keep this G-rated, okay? All right. So, now, come on. Yeah, you did go to Calvin. I can see that. Okay. Come on, my friend. You know, like you dated your girlfriend, you know, or your wife. What was your favorite date? Yeah, okay. The senior prom. Okay. Okay. We're gonna get you on this.
Okay. What do you need to know now? Oh, the senior prom. Which, if you remember from last week, I am a high school dropout. I never had a senior year. But I was dating a senior, and we went to the prom, and she was very upset because we went with another couple, and the other guy and I, in those days, tuxedos came in different colors, and we picked the very same color. And this was apparently a disaster for the women. We didn't care. But I remember afterwards, you know, walking down Lakeshore Drive in Grosse Pointe, and, you know, it was very nice. So that's it. I'll let you go.
Folks, let's give Doug a round of applause for racing up again.
Hey, we got to get this to work. Oh, is that what it is? Well, sure enough. Phone turned off, the thing turned on. Oh. Folks, I am not good with technology. How's that? Ah, cool. Oh, what happened? Did you give me this with a cover on it? No. Oh, good. People are very interested in this topic and trying to bring it back to a little more local. And so somebody brought in this book, Tar and Feathering in Holland. The corner of 8th and Central. 1868. City's 21 years old, and somebody is tar and feathered. We don't know his color or his crime or anything, but kind of interesting. And then we were talking last week about restrictive covenants, and this is from Park Township, 1945. Here's the, I guess, the bill of sale. And subject to restrictions as to occupancy of said premises as follows. That said purchasers, their heirs or assigns, agree not to lease to any colored persons or any persons of the Semitic race, and not to permit any colored person or any person of the Semitic race in any way to occupy any properties of said premises except as servants of such owners. There you have it. Holland, Michigan. But we're going to Detroit. I always listen to NPR when I'm in the car. And this morning they gave what happened years and years ago, but they missed something. 58 years ago today, a party was held in an after-hours drinking establishment in Detroit on Claremont and 12th Street. The purpose of the party was to welcome back a couple of men who had served their country in Vietnam and came back safely. African American men, or in the day it was black men. At that evening, at about, I don't have the time, during the evening, about 10 o'clock, two plainclothesmen entered the building, black plainclothes police officers. No, they tried to get into the party. In order to gather evidence of what's going on there, they were turned away. 3:15 in the morning, they came back with two women. They were admitted. They each ordered a beer. And 10 minutes later, the police raided the place. By the way, from what I read, they never kind of left their beer. They enjoyed the full thing that they purchased. That was the beginning of the absolute worst race riot in the history of America. Detroit, 1967. How many of you remember that? I would expect every hand to go up. When I hear people in West Michigan talk about that, inevitably they tell me, oh, there were riots in Grand Rapids as well. No, there weren't. Grand Rapids riots were what, a four square block area? The entire city. 10 of the 13 precincts in Detroit had riot activity. That's a little different. I was 10 years old at the time. That formative time in a young man's life, and I had to call to ministry on my soul. And I struggled with what was going on. I didn't understand it. This afternoon, we're going to do things a little differently. We're going to hear from 3 different people who were there. Okay? The first one is this man, William Scott III. Anybody remember him? No? He was born around 1946, right after the Second War, about 20 years after the Ocean Suite situation we talked about last week. He was a sensitive child, unfortunately abused by his father. His mother died when he was 14. When he got to school, his teachers thought he was dumb, and so he started being called Dumb Billy. He was a follower, not a leader, a follower. And one of the people he followed was his brother Reggie. He followed Reggie as they played Reggie's favorite game. It was called shoplifting. They would go to a downtown store and try and get something and bring it out, or they go to a merchant on the street and try and get a banana away. And about half the time they got caught, and the other half they didn't. And Billy followed Reggie right into juvenile court. He was assigned a caseworker from Catholic Social Services who recommended that Billy be taken out of the house because of family problems. So Billy was taken out of the house and he was put into a place called the Hawthorne Center, one of the first psychiatric centers for troubled children, located in Northville. Anybody know where Northville is? About 40 miles from downtown Detroit. Now, Billy Scott III was, believe it or not, the grandson of Billy Scott. Come on, the first. I know that just shocks you. Billy Scott I was part of the Great Migration. And he got a job at Dodge Main factory. It's a Chrysler factory, Dodge factory in Hamtramck. They tore that down, and that was such an important factory. I wish they had kept it, but that's the way it is. Well, William Scott I had a son named William Scott II. I got these in mixed order. No, I'm missing a picture. I had a picture of him, but I guess I lost it. Huh? I meant William Scott II. Yeah, I know I had a picture of him, but I work hours on these PowerPoints. I am no good at them. The people out there are mad at me because I don't get them in on time. Oh, there he is. How did he show up? Okay, I'm going bonkers. William Scott II was not as lucky as his father. There were not any jobs available to him. Now, that does not mean that there were not any jobs. When he's coming through, we've got a war going on, World War II. And the three big automakers, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, get these huge contracts from the government. GM, the president of GM, shook hands with the President Roosevelt to oversee this whole thing. He gives a contract to Chrysler to build, I believe it's 10,000 tanks. Before World War II, we had 66. Okay, we're gearing up for war. Chrysler builds a brand new factory to put out tanks, the Detroit Arsenal Tank Plant. 11-mile road and Mound Road. How far away from Black Bottom do you think 11-mile road is? That could be, yeah. How do you get there? Don't have a car. Buses stop at the city limits. He's not allowed to live in Warren, where this is going on. Well, there's another factory being built. That one's for airplanes. Willow Run Airport. They started producing one bomber an hour. But William Scott II wasn't able to go to Willow Run. How are you going to get there? So what does he do? Well, he gets employment with what was available to him. And what's available in his neighborhood? Vice. He starts opening an after-hour drinking establishment in this building. Now, this building, eventually, that was a later thing, but he was after-hours drinking, prostitution, and running the numbers. You know what running the numbers is? Okay. That's how he made his money. Huh? Any of you ever run the numbers? Now we call it the lottery. That's right. And actually running the numbers gave you better odds, but that's another matter. Well, eventually he starts an after-hour drinking establishment in this building, 9125 12th Street in Virginia Park. This building had been used by Mayor Kavanaugh as a place for a center for voting in the previous election. And Kavanaugh won with like 85% of the black vote. But after Kavanaugh is elected, they don't need it anymore. Well, William Scott II opens a drinking establishment on the second floor, illegally. Why was it illegal? He didn't have a liquor license. Why didn't he have a liquor license? Because he was black. He was not allowed, or very difficult at least, to get a liquor license. So he didn't have one. Now, if you don't have a liquor license, that means you can't lose your license, right? Can't lose what you don't have. Which means if you serve alcohol after 2 a.m, who cares? Okay. Now you may notice it says Virginia Park here. I thought the black people lived in Black Bottom, in Paradise Valley. Well, they did. Black Bottom and Hastings Street was the center. Yes, it was crowded. Yes, it was dirty. Yes, it was a mess over, whatever. But it also was the center, second only to Harlem in New York City, for the development of black culture. In fact, people from Grosse Pointe would go there because the jazz was great. What is it? Wild? The town up north, Idlewood. Yeah, these people, they go to Idlewood in the summertime. Okay? Idlewild? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Well, Mayor Cobo, as I mentioned last week, is elected. And this thing is an eyesore. And now the white people have to go by this, and it's really not nice on their way to work downtown. So Mayor Cobo has a urban renewal project. Slum removal. On the street, the saying was slum removal means nigger removal. He tears down Black Bottom and paves it over. It's called Chrysler. It's called 375 today, from I-75 to downtown. It's all paved over. First part of it was across the Paradise Valley, which is now I-94. But then bulldoze it all down. So where are they going to go? 80% of the city, they're not allowed to live in because of restrictive covenants. Well, there was one place that they could go. A place called Virginia Park. Already in the 40s, middle-class black people were moving into Virginia Park. And the reason is Virginia Park was occupied by Jewish people. So if Jewish people can live there, so can black people. In fact, originally Black Bottom was occupied by Jews. It was called Jewtown. They moved over here to Virginia Park. The black folk come into Black Bottom, Paradise Valley. But in the late 40s, early 50s, the Jewish folk are moving out. They're not going to Grosse Pointe. You know why? They're not allowed. There's a point system. That's another conversation. So they go to Birmingham. Bloomfield Hills. You ever go to those places? You ever see any Jewish temples, synagogues? Yeah. They're moving out from Black Bottom, from Virginia Park to these new suburbs. They're being the places they're selling their places to middle class black folk, and then suddenly Mayor Cobo levels Black Bottom, and so everybody has to go there. Well, it's a pretty nice neighborhood, actually. 12th Street during the daytime was a very respectable shopping district. One of the people that is quoted who was there said, you know, the kind of place your mama would want to go. At nighttime, it was not the kind of place your mama would want to go. It was called Sin Strip or the Avenue of Fun. Ladies of the night worked their trade. People from the entire metro area came in, purchased their wares, shall we say. That's where William Scott II starts his after-hours drinking establishment on Sim Strip or the Avenue of Fun. Here's the downward spiral of poverty. William Scott I is an auto worker at Dodge, Maine. William Scott II is a hustler and an unlicensed club owner. William Scott III is in a child's psychiatric center in the suburbs. He stayed at Hawthorne Academy for about 3 years. Then they discovered that this was too expensive. So they moved him to another place, which is not that place. I guess I don't have a picture of it. They moved him to Boys Republic. So 3 years at Hawthorne, 3 years at Boys Republic, 6 years, William Scott is growing up in the suburbs. In Hawthorne, he was one of 2 black kids. In Boys Center, there were a lot of black kids. In these 2 places, he learned a lot of things. He learned how to be proper. He learned that it was best to follow the religious and moral codes taught at church, and one must go to church every Sunday. He taught that he must respect one's elders, obeying them without question, obeying the law without question. He was taught not to cheat, lie, or steal. He was taught to keep away from bad company and immoral people. He was taught not to have sex outside of marriage. And he was taught the American dream. Work hard and you will be successful. Well, he went to church every Sunday. Even when he got to Boys Republic, he did his best to follow what he was being taught. But that started getting in the way. His religiosity began to seep in and give him the idea that maybe he was better than the other boys. Ever known religious people to start to think they were maybe a little better than anybody else? This is not a black thing, right? Even Reformed and Christian Reformed people could possibly fall into that. Well, after 6 years, he's discharged. Where you going to send Billy? His father is a ne'er-do-well. His mother's dead. His sister's pregnant. Reggie, his brother, is institutionalized. Well, they just dumped him off in 12th Street. Things were different on 12th Street. What Billy learned in the suburbs didn't work on 12th Street. Violence was common. Settling differences with your fist was how things were done. Billy, on the other hand, kept himself neat and clean. He spoke properly. He believed in God and country. He attended the Episcopal Church every Sunday. And he started to get labeled proper, whitey. He didn't like the names, but he did believe it made him stand out from the others. Not only was he alienated from his peers, but he's alienated from his own father. His father knew that Billy did not approve of his lifestyle. They never talked about it, but there was tension. But one thing William Scott II did right for Billy is that he really encouraged education. And so Billy eventually ends up in Northern High School, an all-black high school serving Virginia Park on Woodward Avenue. And Billy is enrolled in shop classes, the trades. He wants to have college prep. He goes to the counselor and says, I want to have college prep. They said, no. He said, I'm going to have college prep or I'm not going to come. Finally, the counselor says, okay, but don't blame me if you graduate late. The teachers at Billy liked to learn. He really wanted to learn, but the teachers didn't really want to teach. Very poor teachers. After Billy graduated, there was a walkout on this, just before the riots, there was a walkout in this school. Other students wanted to have college prep courses, but were not allowed. So they ended up walking out. Closed the school down for a day. Well, as I said, Billy liked to learn. And so he graduated and he wanted to continue his education. And he suddenly discovered that the education he already had was absolutely worthless. Would not serve him in college. So he took some low-end jobs. He became a doorman at his father's club, and he studied in the evenings. And eventually, he's accepted at the Michigan Lutheran College. It's the only, it says history images, you know, it's the only one I could find of this school. It was only in existence from 1963 to 1970. Now, having gone to Lutheran high school in the Detroit area, I'm kind of familiar with sort of Lutheranism in Detroit. The Lutherans had started, the Missouri Synod Lutherans had started a university or a college in Ann Arbor. Anybody know what's called? Any Lutheran church, Missouri Synod College is going to be called Concordia. They're all called that. Yeah, Concordia College, liberal arts, Ann Arbor. Michigan Lutheran College is a trade school. But again, he's got limited options. He can't get to Ann Arbor. So he goes here. He completes a year. He completes a year. And over the summer, he has this is the summer of 1967, by the way. He has a difficult time finding enough employment in order to pay tuition for the next year. But finally, Billy's luck changed. He got a job at one of the factories on the second shift. July 22, 1967, 58 years ago today, after finishing his work at the factory. He strolled down 12th Street to his dad's place to meet some friends and to enjoy the party for the Vietnam soldiers. Yeah, Billy liked learning. What he didn't like was the Detroit Police Department. In 1965, this is not Billy, but this is the kind of thing that happened. He was stopped for jaywalking on 12th Street. Billy asked what he had done. In response to that, the cop threw him against the car and called him boy. Now, everybody knows what it means to call a Negro male a boy, right? It's like horrible. Get over there, boy. Billy was given a $10 ticket, which he tore up right in front of the officers and threw it away. Well, there was also the Big Four. The Big Four was an initiative of the Detroit Police Department in response to the Black communities wanting better law enforcement. And so what they did is they took 4 officers and they would have billy clubs and guns and ammunition and all kinds of things. And well, they were supposed to keep the peace, but essentially they were riot control. One day, Billy Scott and his 2 brothers were walking out of a store on 12th Street. And they're stopped by one of the Big Four patrol cars. And they're frisked for no reason at all. He vented his mounting anger by yelling at the police officers, "You can kick my black ass." Pardon the language. A crowd began to form and the Big Four backed off. Billy had no love for the Detroit Police Department. And then there was the Blind Pig. Now, a blind pig is an illegal drinking establishment, typically unlicensed, often after hours. Well, there was a Blind Pig raid on his father's club 1 month before the second raid on July 23. At that time, Billy was hit in the head by a Detroit police officer. He chose to Uncle Tom his way out, and he cooperated. But he vowed that night that the next time he would fight back. He'd even kill the officer if that's what it took. Old Billy Scott had no love at all for the Detroit Police Department. Saturday morning, a Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening on July 22, 4 cops from the Vice Squad, as I've already mentioned, arrive in front of William Scott II's drinking establishment. 2 go in. They were not allowed in. 3:35 the next morning, they are accepted in. They are allowed in with their female escorts, and they buy a beer. Now, the cops had a rule, a 10-minute rule. If somebody went in and didn't come out in 10 minutes, we know there's a problem. So at 3:45, the other 2, and by this time they're augmented by another 12, break down the door. Some indication that they got an axe from the fire department. We're not sure about that. They break out down the door, show their badges, and raid the place. A little bit of a problem. They were not prepared for the size of the crowd. 82 people were there. There's no way that they could handle this. On Sunday night, the Detroit Police Department, it's usually kind of quiet, and so they were understaffed. There were 200 policemen for the entire city that Sunday night. Now they have to get 82 people to headquarters to book them. Well, you can only take so many people in an automobile at a time, right? So they call and they get a paddy wagon, which is kind of unusual. The paddy wagon arrives, and by this time, a crowd had gathered. The windows of the upstairs apartment had been broken, and people were throwing furniture down at the cops. And at this time, Billy Scott arrives at the club. He sees his father and his sister, Wilma, being pushed into the paddy wagon, his sister being hit with a billy club. Williams said, "You don't have to treat them that way. They can walk. Let them walk." He's angry at this point. He climbs the police leave. There's now no police there at all. They all leave. Billy Scott, the non-leader, the quiet one, the good little boy, climbs up on a car and yells at the crowd, "Are we going to let these Peckerwood mother come down here at any time they want and mess us around?" "Hell no," said the crowd. And they get riled up. Filled with rage, Billy goes to an alley. Sorry, the police had not all left, because this couldn't have happened if the police had all left. So the police had not all left yet. He goes to an alley, he picks up a bottle, brings it around, he throws it at the cop, sergeant that's in the doorway. He misses. Breaks on the sidewalk. That was the spark that started the worst riot in American history. Next morning, there are 3,000 people on 12th and Claremont. It's a carnival atmosphere, according to some. The authorities are trying now to get this whole thing under control. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Billy returns home, falls into bed. A few hours later, he wakes up, his house is on fire. The whole block is on fire. The next day, Billy's arrested on Grand Boulevard, not because he was doing anything wrong, but because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. People were looting and taking stuff. He's brought to jailed for 15 days till a judge can get to his case, which was dismissed. Returns to his factory job, which he had lost because he missed 15 days of work. William Scott III, the boy that threw the bottle, the man that threw the bottle that sparked the riot. Police officers were the first line of defense. They acted like a military force, killing 22 people, arresting 7,000 over the course of time. And then at 7:10 in the morning on Monday morning, Colonel H. Drayden, of the National Guard was called. Actually, his wife is called. According to the note in the book, in the noted in the at the precinct, the wife accepted the information. Colonel is at Grayling, Michigan. Camp Grayling. Training, weekend warriors. How far is Grayling from Detroit? 200 miles. How long does that take? Yeah. How long if you're in a government vehicle and have to obey the? It's a long time. That night, finally, the National Guard arrived, Monday night. And we have with us today somebody who arrived that night. And he's going to take it over because he knows the story better than I do at this point. Name is Dwayne Neuenhaus. Please welcome him. Oh. Do you need this or is it? You know what? I'm going to take my coffee.
After listening to the Lieutenant Commander, Dr. Reverend.
Retired.
We got the call. I was in the Grand Haven National Guard. Part of the guards were up at Camp Grayling training. Part of the guards, I don't remember all the distinction, were out at the armories. And I got a call that evening, report to the guard armory at a certain time. I thought, knowing the Army, it's going to be a whole lot of hurry up and wait. I got to the armory after taking my time getting ready. The buses from Grand Rapids were there and we were on our way. If I'd been 10 minutes later, I wouldn't have made it. This was all planned in advance. In 1940s, early 40s, there was race riots in Detroit. That was black versus white versus 67. It was blacks against the system. Anyway, so we arrived early in the morning. One of the things that was so shocking to me, you know, being raised north of Zeeland, I didn't see one black person per year. And so I didn't have an opinion, good, bad, or otherwise. The news wasn't national. So we get to Detroit, we come into the black suburbs, and what do I see? Black people standing in the front porch, on the lawns, on the sidewalks. They're all clapping. They wanted us there because they wanted their neighborhoods to be safe. As we got further into the city, the only thing standing as far as the eye can see in all directions are chimneys. Everything else has been burned down. And if you look in each basement, there's a long torch of about 10 feet of flame coming from the natural gas lines that were into the houses. We got stationed, my spot was in the same block as the Blind Pig. And as we're all standing there, a man comes along with a big box with 50-cent candy bars, handing out one to each of us. Now, a 50-cent candy bar, Hershey's, was a big candy bar in the 1960s. I was on a lawn. The man that it was in the house, lived in the house behind me, black. He come down, he asked me, "Are you going to be here tonight?" I says, "Yes." He says, "The front door is open. There's chicken in the oven. There's coffee on the stove." They had no problem with the man in green. Their heartburn was the man in blue. As we had been coming in, we went past this street that we saw, and there was 2 traffic lanes, if I remember right, going one way and 2 the other way, and then a parking lane on each side. And the buildings were all, like in Holland, 2, 3 stories high. And as we got stopped in the traffic, the truck that we're in is open, and there's snipers firing from the tops of the buildings. down at the police across, 2 lanes over, trying to get under their cars to get out of the line of fire. They could hit any one of us in green. They had no heartburn with the man in green. They wanted us there. That night, it was sometime after midnight, I was laying on the lawn with a police officer. And at the end of the block, 61 Ford light blue come flying up to the intersection. It was immediately surrounded by all guardsmen with their rifles out, bayonets on, and he stops. The policeman I'm with jumps up, runs on over, grabs the guy out of the car, he's black, puts him in the spread eagle. Everybody familiar with that? Okay. And starts questioning him. The man said he'd been released by Chrysler. Chrysler did not release people during curfew hours, so that was a lie. So the policeman is yelling at him, and he had a shotgun sawed off, and he smacked him hard over the right shoulder. I'm standing right next to the policeman. The gun goes off accidentally, and you can imagine what that would do to your ear. The man falls down, and the policeman kicks him so hard, I can hear the ribs cracking. He says, "Get the keys." So somebody gets the keys, opens the trunk. We were told to throw them in, close the door, we left. That's why they had problems with the man in blue.
Oh.
At the school grounds that we're located by, there is the school buildings, and we're one platoon in a room a little smaller than this, room for 40 guys. And then we go out to the gate where we're accompanying policemen and going out, but there's a utility building right there. One day I'm coming past the building and I hear somebody weeping loudly inside. So I go and take a look, and it's a black police officer. And he's saying, "I worked all my life so hard to keep a good name for be a representative of the black people. And it was all being destroyed by the black people burning down all their businesses, their gas stations, their commercial floor, and everything else at the bottom of the higher buildings." That gives you something of the feeling that they went through. Across the street from the school, there's a police car, a black man being questioned by 4 policemen. They put the cuffs behind him and started trotting him down the street to the police car. The back door of the police car had been open, and just before he gets to the police car, they get him trotting, lift up his back or his hands behind him, and make sure they throw him in so hard his head rams against the other side. When we would go out and get into a truck to join a policeman, to spread the police out, they had, for each policeman, you'd put anywhere from 6 to 8 guardsmen. So the policeman could be very thin and spread out. Us guardsmen up to that point had never been trained on on riot duty. After that, we were trained extensively on riot duty kind of work. So we didn't know civilian laws. So to make the policemen cover a much bigger area, you add 6, 8 police guardsmen with each one. They could spread a lot of ground. So we get in a truck. The truck follows the police car, stops right outside the gate, which was closed. The policeman comes out of his car, looks at the truck by us and said, everybody lock and load. If you're not locked and loaded, get out of the truck and get back to school. They were, intending to use it. A kid I grew up with, he's cousins to my cousins, so we're related, went to school with me, worked with me for 43 years. So I'm telling you this because I didn't see what took place, but he did, and he was very close to me. He said a Buick Riviera came flying up to an intersection, and as he saw that there were guardsmen and police there, the car, Buick Riviera, immediately put it in reverse and started peeling backwards. The policeman hollers out, "Fire!" and everybody opens fire. The car looks like Bonnie and Clyde, careens off into a window. Everybody inside dead. We were stationed one time in right downtown. That was one of the first days. Main big high-rise buildings, and one police officer was with us. There was a Greek restaurant there. It was called Greekstown. Doug may be familiar with it. I'm not. But anyway, they fed us because our mess halls and everything else weren't set up because we were just brought on in. We fed at local restaurants to where we were invited in because they wanted our presence there, or from the Salvation Army. So we're in there, and then we stand outside of a building with a police officer, and two of us, Wayne Westfield and myself, and they rotate every 4 hours, the policemen do, but we're going to be there like all night long, which is fine. And finally at midnight, the remaining police officer leaves. And we've been up for like 24 hours already, so we laid down on the sidewalk, but we had lots of ammunition. We could carry whatever amount of ammunition you wanted. And we had M1s, and if you're familiar with an M1 clip, it's 8 rounds, and you can put one clip between each row of buttons and some on the weapon sling. So it's very visible. We're armed to the teeth. So we're laying down. The police officer said as he left, anybody comes over, gives you any problem, there's a manhole cover behind the building. When you're done with them, just throw them down the manhole. They're serious. We would be on 12-hour shifts, but as soon as you got off one 12-hour shift, you got a choice. Go back to the classroom and sit down, or go out on another 12-hour shift. And that's what we did. It was a one-in-a-lifetime chance to go through this and see it. Not that we were fascinated with it or wanted to see, it just, you don't miss out on an opportunity to experience something like that in life. The guy I joined up with in the Guard and spent a lot of evenings traveling around the city and stuff when we were young, hanging out. Don Lamer from Borkillo. When he went in a convoy, they went to the 13th precinct. Doug may know, familiar with where that is. Okay. Alongside the building, there is a ramp that goes down a level, and there's a parking lot down there. Don goes down, gets down there, and they're with a hose and with brooms washing blood off the wall. And the policeman says that's the third time tonight we've had to scrub down the wall. They would put people in spread eagle position, and then didn't like the answer they got, or just for sheer meanness, would bang their head into the wall. I'm done.
You got one more really exciting story?
My favorite date is July 23. Now, there's a reason. Tomorrow, the 23rd of July, my wife and I will have been married 60 years. We talked earlier about different situations. How many people here know what Nino means? N-I-N-O. No Irish need apply.
N-I-N-A.
Thank you.
I'm a lieutenant commander. I know how to spell. Yeah, he outranks me. Thank you, Dwayne. Now, life does go on. Okay, we're going to slip back to that first Sunday. And guess what's going on? The Tigers have a doubleheader against the New York Yankees. That morning, WJR, 7-ish. Huh? Yeah, WJR 760 Detroit. They had one announcement about the riots. And then the mayor and his people got the news media to agree to a blackout. Can you imagine that happening today? a news blackout so they could get the thing under control. Jim Campbell owns the Detroit Tigers, and he said to his announcers, "You are not, I repeat, not under any circumstances to refer to the smoke over the left field fence." Game starts at 2 o'clock, first game. Unfortunately, Mayor Kavanaugh did not have authority in Windsor. CKLW, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, breaks the news about the riots in Detroit. Yeah, we saw that already. Somebody here was going to talk about who was the lady March, I think. You want to come and give your story? We're going to have a hard time getting out of here.
We were in Lansing and knew nothing about the riots. My parents' anniversary was today, and my birthday was the 19th. So we were driving back into Detroit the 22nd and didn't hear anything about any of this. But I was working for the welfare department in Detroit at that time. I had an option to work at Hawthorne, which you saw, but the welfare department paid twice as much. My husband was in dental school, so money was more important at that time. The welfare department was located at the base of the Jeffries Project Lodge. It was the old gas building. I don't know if any of you know what that was, but it was a one-story building. And my husband would drop me off at work and pick me up after work. And I was evacuated under sniper fire the next day. And a few days later, there were about 80 people working at the welfare department at that time. There were 5 of us that were white. And I was kind of colorblind. I didn't grow up in Holland, Zealand area. I had other experiences, but everybody had to have a college degree to do the job that I did. And supervisors often had master's degrees, but only 5 of us were white. 2 of them were secretarial type positions. The other 3 of us were intake workers. I had a very large Black supervisor. And one of my first clients, a day or 2 after things had calmed down, came, sat down at my desk across from me, flipped open the switchblade and started cleaning his fingernails. My nice, tall, Black supervisor, we had these dividers about this big with a telephone that I shared with a person on the other side. And he came and kind of whispered to me, meet me in the back. And so he came over and took care of this guy. The rule was that if you did not live in the state of Michigan for a year and prove it, you were given a bus ticket back to wherever you came from. This guy asked for a bus ticket back to Chicago. When the supervisor came back, he said, "Did you see that little red insignia on his shirt?" And I said, "I noticed it, Black Panthers." One of my friends who worked there, who happened to be one of the secretarial type staff, lived very close to 12th Street. And later we were talking and he said there was a lot of outside influence that came in and spurred the riots on.
Yeah, people came up from Toledo to enjoy the carnival.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot from outside of Detroit. Yeah, let's give both a hand. Monday, things kept getting worse. Sniper fire, which you mentioned on that Monday, we started having a lot of sniper fire. Early in the morning, George Romney, he's that one, governor of Michigan, calls the President of the United States, a man named Lyndon B. Johnson. You may remember him. Says, we might need some help, up to 5,000 troops. Later that morning, he sends a telegram recommending that Johnson send some troops. Later yet, about 11 o'clock, he sends a second telegram recommending that Johnson send troops. Johnson's attorney general, a guy named Clark, was on the case. I believe it was Clark, was on the case, and he had problems with that word recommended. You see, you can't just send federal troops. There's legal issues here. Romney also had legal issues. If Romney were to request, then the insurance people would not pay for the damage. So you have this tension between the two. Now, politicians being what they are, there's more to the story. Romney happens to be considering running for president on the Republican ticket, and Johnson is the Democratic president who will be reelected, who will be up for reelection in a couple of years. This is a great opportunity to show the nation that Romney can't even handle Detroit. How can he handle this, the country? Johnson's autobiography, really glosses over this true story. But there's another problem. The U.S. Army is mostly white. To see federal soldiers who are white doing law enforcement on Black people in the civil rights movement is not exactly a good photo op. So it took the whole day. Johnson agrees, by executive, he agrees to send some troops to Selfridge. Later the day, they move to the fairgrounds, which is on the edge of Detroit. Finally, Romney and Kavanaugh just say we need, I forget how the word they use, but we need these troops. They had met with the Black community, Black leaders, the Black representative in Congress, the Black community, the merchants, Black merchants, the Black religious leaders. They were all, except one, in agreement. We need federal forces. 11 o'clock that evening, Johnson finally signs the executive order. Still took 2 hours to get him downtown from the state fairgrounds. 22 hours to get the federal forces in there. How long did it take you to get there? Now we're going to get my testimony. When you're in Grosse Pointe and you're Christian Reformed, your family's Republican, at least in those days. And so it's all Johnson's fault. And Kavanaugh. But the truth of the matter is, we're just frustrated because our city is on fire and the politicians aren't doing anything about it. The next day, or at midnight, Monday night, Tuesday morning, Johnson goes on national radio, television, and he gives an announcement that he is sending troops to Detroit. You can get this on YouTube if you want it. Let there be no mistake about it. The looting, arson, plunder, and pillage which have occurred are not part of the civil rights protest. There is no American right to loot stores or to burn buildings or to fire rifles from the rooftops. This is crime. He had a Southern drawl. I can still remember that. This is crime. And crime must be dealt with forcefully and swiftly, and certainly under the law. I'm not going to tell you every day, because that would take another hour. But here's the damage. 43 people killed, 1,089 injured, 7,231 arrests, 2,509 stores had been looted or burned. And by the way, most of the stores were actually owned by Jewish people. Okay, they had used to live there. They moved out to the suburbs, but they kept their businesses there. That was one of the frustrations. 690 buildings were destroyed, 388 families were displaced. What I do remember when the Army came, I remember Jeeps and trucks and everything. We lived like 3 blocks from I-94, and there was a overpass in Harper Woods. And I remember on my bike watching them all, these green, going down I-94 from Selfridge. I also remember going by the Michigan Bell Telephone Company, which was the largest building in the area, probably